Hello, welcome to the news for the week of 8 March 2020. Microsoft starts disabling authentication internally. New ransomware called Pwned Locker is out and about, and a secret sharing app called Whisper is the safest place on the internet. Today, James Adams from Core Security, a help systems company, is going to join us to talk about how to think and act like a hacker. So I've been needing that advice for a while. And all this and more on this edition of Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Make sure your team is prepared to fight off the latest cybersecurity threat. IT Pro TV is the resource to keep you and your IT team skills up to date. You can stream IT Pro TV courses live and on demand, so there's no need to send staff to off-site training. Team subscriptions include Pro Portal, so managers have full control over your team's training schedule. Go to itpro.tv/hack-naked and use the code HN30 to try it free for 7 days and receive 30% off your monthly membership.
In this time of plague, let's get to the news that doesn't involve the plague. This week, Microsoft started disabling authentication. Actually, they've been disabling it for a while. Microsoft said about 0.5%, so you have to listen to that carefully, 0.5% of their enterprise accounts were compromised every month. And that at first doesn't sound like much. But, I mean, you know, if I could run Mimikatz on 2 machines out of 1,000 at your company, that would be pretty good for me and bad for you. So in an RSA talk, Alex Weiner said that 1.2 million Microsoft customer accounts were compromised in January of 2020. 99% of those accounts were not using MFA. So Microsoft decided to block legacy protocols like POP and SMTP and all these old protocols that are very prevalent. Of course, the minute they blocked all these things, they found out that it wasn't just as simple as saying we're not going to allow those protocols anymore, as many of us have found out the hard way. A lot of things beyond just the operating system level or the server level, et cetera, not only needed those protocols, but relied on those things to actually work. So when they blocked the protocols, one of the things in their test group that crashed was their basic sales app that they use at Microsoft. So they trialed this thing with 60,000 salespeople in 2018, and basically they ended up with a whole day of downtime since their main sales app crashed. Long, tedious process. But this was an RSA talk, so you might be able to get to it if you have access to RSA. So it's kind of an interesting thing to check out if you're thinking about what most of us network administrators have thought about, which is just blocking something. So just like, I'm just going to shut this down. And we've all done it, and we've all suffered for it. Also during RSA, the Qualsys Security Conference had a nice presentation about app development and the lack of security in the process. Again, something we all know, but the real specificity of this talk was about the lateness of security getting into the development chain. So the cloud and DevOps have really resulted in a shortened development cycle. So Lambdas, like Lambda functions and Lambda developments and things like that, mean you may even have even more rapid development, and the deployment of these short-lived tools and entities being used really takes that old-fashioned development process and crushes it. So when we try to use that tired old waterfall model from your 1964 computer science textbook, it's probably not going to cut it when people are developing using Dockers, Lambdas, et cetera, in their app development life cycles. So we have to really figure out how to get security into this process right at the beginning, because I kept seeing it with development cycles where you would see, you know, I don't have it. You see the security block getting plugged into the back end of the development process, and by then it's really not only too late to embed security in that device, it may actually be too late to evaluate it due to the complexity once we involve all these extremely convoluted things into our DevOps. At the same time, an article on CNET was talking about FIDO again. So FIDO, which you probably know is Fast Identity Online, is one of these things that's being developed by a lot of operations, and it's a kind of holy grail because everybody basically agrees that we all want to get rid of, we really want to get rid of passwords. And FIDO is a mechanism that allows that reputedly. Can we do it? This is what this article was about. Everybody has a mobile device, mostly. If you have that, I guess the idea is sound. But basically, I think Weinert's talk was where I tied all this together. The technology can all get unraveled due to legacy apps and systems that require a password. They just don't have a mechanism to suddenly adapt to, oh, I'm going to use this other whole thing. And when we try to put that other whole thing, it's going to probably turn into a pretty difficult trial. So it's going to be a hard slog to get rid of passwords, just like it's a hard slog to get rid of legacy protocols in our networks. But it's an interesting article where somebody was talking about that. I did see an article this week about smishing, a word I do not like. I hate these words that I can't pronounce, and they also sound like some kind of food that you order in a place, and you're like, I wonder what that is, and you get it, and it's just exactly like it sounds like. I got a plate of smishing, and it tasted like smish and ing. Yeah, it was bad. But smishing is a word that's used to describe text messages instead of email. And the reason I thought this was interesting, you may immediately be going, come on, Doug, it's just phishing, and they spelled it a different way so somebody could write an article. In that regard, it is. But the interesting thing about this to me is that in the world of BYOD, this is a zero trust issue. I'm carrying a phone into my place of employment, and unlike my email account, which is monitored by the company, and they won't let me access my home email account, and maybe they're writing herd on these inbound phishing scams, my phone, they're not. And my phone has so many vectors from which infection can ensue. Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, cellular, all those things may actually be communicating with things inside the building. So if a smishing attack can utilize Bluetooth to infect the Coke machine because, I've got that. That's really what the focus of this paper was. So it might be worth your time to think about that a little bit. These BYOD personal devices are everywhere. A lot of side channel options pop up in that case. So all of a sudden, Bluetooth on a cellular phone becomes a huge issue that we may not actually be taking care of. It could really create a kind of nasty localized hotspot inside an organization. Pwned Locker is a new ransomware that popped up. Crypsis Group found this new species in February. It's entirely made up of shell code. I've really been laying off talking about ransomware because it's basically like, yeah, it's out there. We've all got it. But this one's all shell code. It didn't have much drama other than that. It used a weak algorithm for encryption, but it did demand $500,000+. So I was like, these guys are serious. It does, as usual, delete shadow copies and all that kind of thing. But it may really be a tough one to find due to it being only shell code. So the remarkable thing there was the design of it rather than what it actually did. A report on the state of ransomware from Kaspersky did demonstrate that ransomware has started being a major player targeting even really low-end kind of things. They've stopped just going after the big players. They've stopped just going after big, juicy targets. And they started going after things like libraries and nonprofits. You get there eventually, right? This is Kaspersky described an evolutionary pattern for ransomware where all these large, low-hanging food sources have already been picked and harvested and protected. So now, as everybody's fighting over the remaining food, you notice how I'm tying this back into the world today. Fighting over the remaining food sources, basically we're all fighting over, very, very low-end kind of things, and you're seeing people going after literally nonprofits. So for every Chanel and Burberry, there has to be one Crazy Al's used clothing store that you could target, I guess, and just say, instead of a $500,000+ ransom, you ask for, say, $5 and just hope you get a whole bunch of them, I guess. Whisper, I love this one, a secret sharing app with the tagline, the safest place on the internet. Come on. Basically left all your secrets hanging out in the breeze. 12 Security released this issue to the Washington Post in an attempt to get it corrected. The issue, wait for it, a non-password protected database was exposed to the internet at the safest place on earth. That allowed access to all the secrets. Now, being old, being old, I don't feel that comfortable discussing my favorite sex toys for no apparent reason other than just to tell you about it. Giving you my secret. But apparently a lot of people, millions and millions and millions of people really like the idea of saying, I'm not even going to say the things I'm thinking because then I'll get in trouble. But a lot of people love this idea of putting this sort of content on a site for people to read. Now, they don't use their real names, but they do use their ages. This same company got in a lot of hot water earlier in the year because they were location tracking people, and they found out that a lot of the people who were enjoying sharing these sorts of secrets were under the age of 18. And their ages were in the database. And, of course, the age and their location was associated with their secret. So I guess if your secret is I'd really like to meet a pedophile, well, guess what? The pedophiles could find you. So the app actually has an internal rating system that is called the predator probability. And over 9,000 users of this system scored 100% on the predator probability. Now, I don't know how you score 100% on predator probability unless you tick the box that it says, are you a predator? Yes. Have you predated lately? Yes. I don't know. I mean, not to make light of it, but geez, come on. Don't put your secrets on apps. Crex24, which had about 2.6 million in trading volume last year, is not a giant cryptocurrency exchange. But they recently have been accused of some possibly crooked behavior, maybe a Ponzi game. It's hard to say. Livecoin, which is a Brazilian coin reporter, basically reported there was a lot of odd behavior going on HTML coin, which is a lesser-known cryptocurrency, and basically that the site had frozen funds for a user whose name was not used. But in February, apparently they cost him $32,000. Crex24 then announced that hackers had stolen 200 million, wait for that too, HTML coins, which amounted to about $11,200 from wallets on their site. But other anonymous sources in this incredibly well-documented story basically claimed it was more like 1.3 billion HTML coins, which were transferred into HitBTC. Now, this is not an uncommon issue amongst exchanges. We've seen this. This particular exchange is about 137th worldwide. The current price of HTML coin is $0.000058 US, and there's about 53 billion coins in circulation. Google released Chrome 80 in February and replaced the aging DPAPI encryption system. I used to call that DPAPI, but I don't know. I'm always wrong on these pronunciations of these acronyms. But they replaced that with AES 256 to try and protect malware from stealing cookies and passwords, which was pretty easy to do with the old API. But of course, it didn't take long for sites to update their code to steal passwords and cookies from the new version. Raccoon, which is an info stealer, reported on in the article that I put on the wiki, updated their malware site the same day as the release, offering upgrades at a discounted rate of only $90 to their malware so that you could get around the AES 256. Russian criminal exchanges had a lot of quick ads, so I guess now the criminal exchanges all have marketing departments at the same time, so that they want to try to exploit Chrome and also use it as a platform for marketing their new malware. So it's all new and improved to take advantage of Chrome 80. Now, with that, when we come back, we will welcome James Adams from Core Security with expert commentary. So stick around for that. It should be interesting.
As technology continues to evolve and expand, so have the countless ways our critical systems can be put in jeopardy. Ransomware attacks, misconfiguration, user error, and malicious threat actors, to name a few. As IT infrastructures continue to grow and diversify, how do you ensure stable security? Core Security, a help systems company, provides an analytics-driven, layered approach to security with a portfolio that enables both proactive and reactive responses. With Core Security, you can reduce risk by limiting access, detect upcoming and active threats, test for security weaknesses, and efficiently monitor data for actionable insights. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/core security.
Welcome back to the Security Weekly News. Now joining us is James Adams, who is a sales engineer for Core Security, which focuses on helping organizations reduce cyber risk through pen testing, vulnerability management, and network threat detection. James has years of expertise in the security industry, starting in the MSSP space at SecureWorks and then spending some time at RSA. So stick around to listen to James give us some expert commentary on securityweekly.com. James?
Yes. Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me. The topic we really kind of wanted to talk about a little bit today I thought would be a good topic, was around how pen testing has really kind of moved from just typical vulnerability validation to a more stronger red teaming adversarial approach. We've seen of the companies that we're talking to, companies no longer just saying, hey, we want to patch these systems. We want to validate if this vulnerability is accurate, or if this vulnerability is real, it can be exploited on, and really kind of moving into, can we mimic an advanced persistent threat, or can we use some of the MITRE framework to start kind of staging attacks to help our SecOps team or our blue team to be able to better defend this organization.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Cool. No, I mean, that's great.
Yeah, so that was kind of what we were talking about, and that's why we've moved in the direction that we have. I mean, we look at the spectrum of penetration testers that we talk to all the time, and they could come in with very inexperienced skill level. They could also come in with really high skill level. So we try to understand at what point are they going to be able to utilize our tool or some of the other tools that they're using in the marketplace, and really help advance that skill set, along with providing them with a way to perform those penetration tests, being able to pivot past traditional firewalls or IDS or IPS really is something that was happening more around 3 or 4 years ago or 5 years ago. But now with the MITRE attack framework and some of the stuff that companies are looking at from there, it's really trying to get in more of, can I set up a sophisticated command and control? Can I pivot deeper into the network? Can I own Active Directory and really be able to take some of the credentials from that type of test and move throughout the environment, whether I'm using native tools or living off the land approach with PowerShell, stuff like that, or am I going to have to bring in my own toolkit or rely on kind of moving through different parts of the network off of routes that are already available.
I like that idea. I mean, what kind of tools do you really like to use? I mean, do you have like favorites?
Well, I mean, obviously, I like to stick with the one that we produce, Core Impact. But some of the testers that we talk to, a lot of the testers are using stuff like Bloodhound. They want to be able to integrate with stuff like Bloodhound. And then most recently, Cobalt Strike was what we were really getting a lot of customers asking about. Can we integrate with Cobalt Strike? We already integrate with a lot of other scanners, which is, more around the starting of a penetration test career, right? Is, hey, we're scanning for vulnerabilities. We want to understand where our vulnerabilities are at. Then we kind of progress to penetration testing. And now we're getting further into being able to assist them with command and control. Can I make my command and control look like Netflix, right? Can I set up a sophisticated C2 where it can beacon out? And we were working on some of those developments with our own product. And by doing so, customers were already asking, hey, we work with Cobalt Strike, or we're using Cobalt Strike for this. So we started having conversations around, can we integrate with that tool along with some of the other integrations that we have? And then it evolved into us, acquiring Cobalt Strike, which really helps out the portfolio and the direction that we're trying to move Core Security. And that's because that's what the market's asking. The market and the pen testing community is really saying, hey, this is the direction we want to go. It's shifting the paradigm from just basic get in, this is a vulnerability, it's exploitable, we validated that, to, hey, how much further can we go? How can we really give you the ability to harden your network? Let's use a lot of these other advanced tools to see, what type of actual vulnerabilities you have, not just a vulnerability in the code, but maybe a vulnerability, like you mentioned earlier, whether it be weak passwords, whether it be they're using MFA, or whether it could be that there's, protocols that are in place, network protocols that are being taken advantage of, like SMB.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had a couple of questions I wanted to ask you about, because I don't know the answers on your particular products, but sure. One of the things I know that your products do is agentless. Is that accurate?
So, kind of. We do have a network defense product that's agentless. It really kind of looks, when you're looking at it from a blue team perspective, it can look at the traffic analysis that's leaving your company, or leaving your organization, I should say, and phoning out to a botnet or command and control. So that one's agentless. When it comes to our penetration testing tool, we do rely on agents to be on the endpoint. It's different than an agent you might think of when you're talking about antivirus, or even when you have to deploy agents for scanners. It's more around, once you have a vulnerability that's exploited, or if you want to put an agent on a machine because you have their credentials for SSH, or you have their credentials for something else, you can start setting agents up as pivot points within the organization. So, really quickly gives you a way to set up a new vantage point when you're trying to do a test. So, hey, I can't get inside this firewall environment to this cardholder data. I've tried all different avenues. That's one of the tests in general. But then once you place an agent inside of that network environment, or in that firewall environment, then you're able to use that agent as a pivot point, almost like a checkbox, to start scanning that environment. And then maybe if you find another vulnerability in another segment inside the network, you're able to place an agent there. So you start creating like a daisy chain effect of having these agents talk to you, and it's a way for you to hide yourself as a tester, to be able to keep yourself hidden while you're relying on proxy agents to start kind of maneuvering the network.
Yeah, I mean, I used to call that stair stepping when I did tests like that, because it was like, okay, I wasn't able to get here, so that's a good thing, but then I'm going to go ahead and assume I did, because I want to test something else and see what it looks like at the next level. So that was a way for me to move on, to say, well, okay, that one passed the test, but I want to see, what if somebody did get past it, because who knows what's coming next week, and who knows if there's a better tester out there, which I'm sure there was.
Yeah, maybe there wasn't, right? But that's actually really good to talk to people about. No, there's always somebody better at it. But we talk to people about that all the time, right? Like, look, just because you couldn't get past that doesn't mean that you're not good at your job, or doesn't mean that the tools failed you, but actually it could just mean that your defenses are working, right? And they're working as they should. And you've tested that compensating control. So let's take a step past that. And MFA is usually what does it, right? Hey, MFA blocked this. Okay, let's take a step past that. Let's assume maybe you had an insider threat, or maybe somehow they social engineered their way inside the organization. So MFA is pretty much out of the picture at that point. And now they've got some type of foothold or beachhead inside your organization. What can they pivot to, or what kind of access can they get? So you start testing at each layer of their defenses, just to make sure that each layers of defenses are strong and providing the adequate control of that area.
Well, that's a lot easier to sell today, I think, to people in the company, because when I was doing that, I always get a lot of pushback on it, because they were like, well, if you couldn't get in, you couldn't get in. I'm like, come on. I mean, the earliest things I did with pen testing were back in the 80s. We didn't call it pen testing then. But I mean, just literally starting with social engineering style attacks, which were war dialing phishing attacks of the day. And, I mean, I almost inevitably could get in. I mean, even in 1986, I was sitting there calling people, and no matter how much we trained them, I would eventually talk somebody out of their password, or their username and password, and their mother's maiden name and their bank account number usually. I mean, all that worked. And today I think it's an easier sell, because people get so much information about phishing. And I think most people realize that phishing is probably going to happen regardless. So just because we couldn't penetrate the defenses doesn't mean somebody can't come in with credential stuffing or some other approach.
Yeah, sure. And that's why we try to give them options for the attack vector, right? Like, hey, you couldn't get past the firewall when you traditionally tried to scan it from the outside, or what have you, right? You tried different techniques of fragmentation and splicing. So let's just take another avenue. Do they have a public-facing website that maybe you're able to maneuver through that website with the SQL injection, drop some type of payload onto the server, and now you're inside of the DMZ from the server, stuff like that. Or just go with the route that almost always works if you have a large enough organization and start sending compelling phishing emails.
Absolutely.
See if you can get someone to either click on the link, provide you with credentials somehow, or maybe drop some type of payload through that link that you provided and get a foothold on that network and move through. And again, like your point you mentioned, each of these defenses they put up, they need to test those. So just because the AV or the endpoint detection called it doesn't actually mean that it's a failed test. It means that the defenses are working, and maybe you have to try a new avenue to try to get in there. So that's what I think a lot of testers now are doing is saying, hey, look, they've got a lot more defenses in place. Like the defense in depth is a lot stronger, especially with EDR being very good at the endpoint, correlating that information back to firewalls and IPS. So there's a lot of correlation on the defense side. It makes it harder and harder for testers to be able to get in and stay in and be persistent, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to go more in that adversarial emulation category, or the adversarial emulation strategy and trajectory, I should say, excuse me, is because once you get in, you take all the time to get past all these different layers of defense. You want to be able to maintain persistence, and you want to do it in a way that's stealthy without giving up, your spot, so to speak.
No, I like that a lot. I mean, I've been advocating that for a long, long time. And again, you got a lot of pushback because a lot of perception early about pen tests was just that the idea is it's a game, and I'm trying to get in and you're trying to keep me out, and the minute you keep me out, you win. And I'm like, that's not how this works. I mean, I'm going to be persistent. I'm going to keep doing this as long as it takes. I'm a nation, and again, I had a lot more trouble with this back then because I didn't have, North Korean hackers and Ukrainian hackers to quote and say, yeah, they're going to keep at it. They're getting paid to do this. And it was really tough to sell upper management on it. And of course, the IT administration people did not like to hear that because they're like, well, you're rigging the game so that you win. And I'm like, this isn't a game. This is me giving you information about your network so that you can decide where the risks are and where the real threat vectors come in.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why, when we talk to people about third-party testing or they utilize us for third-party testing, it's, switch vendors every couple of years, right?
Yeah.
Get a fresh set of eyes, get a fresh set of testers on there. They might see something that the last ones didn't. It doesn't mean that the testers before weren't any good. It just means that they picked up on something or they had a different technique that they like to use, a different playbook that they like to run. And it's helpful for the organizations to start kind of, moving things around, keeping their defenses, sharp by having that. And I think that's why the MITRE attack framework is really something that a lot of companies are using, for a lot of organizations and pen testers are using as a good run book. It's like, look, we're worried about this type of ransomware that's being sent by this type of botnet and these type of post-exploitation activities. So let's take those post-exploitation tactics and techniques and let's go ahead and start trying to do those inside of our organization. Whether we get caught or not, it's not so much the issue. It's more around, can our defenses be in practice or have good practice from us doing this so that they can be better defend when a real attack happens.
I completely agree. I will say I see, and I've been asked to review pen tests for people. In a couple of cases, it involved lawsuits against pen testers because a company felt like they didn't get their money's worth. Where somebody charged them $50,000 to do a pen test, and basically what they did was run Metasploit and hit print. And literally, I saw one that was that bad. I mean, they had just run Metasploit, hit print, and dumped, the reports, and then handed it to them and said, "Thanks, that'll be $50,000. You pass." And some companies want that, which is very naive, but that they just want to check that box and be done. But
and that's what I say is that a lot of it now is just no longer box checking. Now I think it's because one, I mentioned MITRE a couple of times ad nauseum. But the other thing I think is because there's a lot of medium out there that allows pen testers to train. I mean, if you go to different sites, it gives you ability to, Udemy, Cybrary, all of these, Pluralsight, all of these have different CEH or how to understand pen testing, how to do these different things. So for $12 or $13, you can buy a 70-hour course on red teaming, and you could be, 23 years old and start learning that skill set where before you didn't have that. So the testers are getting much better. The tools are getting much better on offense and defense. So it's really making for an interesting way to understand, how we're securing our networks and how we're actually trying to test those security levels.
And I had a phone call yesterday from a high school student who said, I just want to know how to get into this, and said, I'm trying to figure out how to build a career. And, and I was telling him the exact same thing that you just said, which is you can spend very little money and go out there and get courses. You can intercapture the flags. You can see what other pen testers are doing. And I remember telling this, I was like, one thing about nerds, we love to talk about what we're doing. And when these other pen testers see that you are admiring their techniques, they're usually more than happy to show them to you and say, oh, wow, yeah, let me show you how I did that. And you can really pick up a lot of information by getting involved in that community.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm going to a capture the flag that's going to be 16 different high schools in the next couple of days to kind of monitor. They're going to be using our tool. They're going to be using other tools. And I'm really kind of excited about it because I'm interested to see the skill level that they have at that level, right? I mean, I'm probably way more skilled than I am. So it's interesting to see like what they're being trained on, what they're being taught at such an early level. And think about it, if they're being trained at 14 and 15 years old on, Mimikatz and password dumps and all these, what are they going to be able to do when they're 25 and 30, having 15, 20 years of experience at this type of stuff, right? Like it really is going to make compelling. And I think overall it's good for the business of security, or it's good for the industry of security, because you're going to have very skilled, qualified people coming up out of college, out of high school that can, come into your organization and very quickly, start showing value and start giving the company value at the same time.
I completely agree. Well, thank you, James, for being on Security Weekly News today. It was great to have you here. Come back anytime and we can talk some more. This is a short show, so thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Bye.
All right. Finally, despite the fact that I went to JFK Terminal 4 last week, and I even picked up a payphone handset at Coney Island just to see if it had a dial tone, which is the New York equivalent of having a hobo spit in your mouth, I did not get COVID-19. That is not to say you shouldn't wash your hands and read the science. To time your washing of your hands, I would suggest singing the classic Grimness of Which Shepherds Mourn by Dark Throne. Give that one a try. I won't read all the lyrics, but you can look them up if you want to hear that. Thanks for joining us on Security Weekly News. We'll be back on Friday with the Security Weekly Wrap-Up, and we'll see you then.